Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to how a European sees America after living in America for 6 months. This is going to be really truly fascinating because, there are a lot of people who move from Europe to America and vice versa. But I think YouTube is probably the only platform really that kind of gives an insight into, actual people, boots on the ground that have experienced the best and worst of living in Europe versus America. But also, I think it depends on where in Europe you grow up because, not all countries in Europe are the same. There's going to be better and worse countries to live in. So I'm quite curious as to where she moved from. If it was a G7 country like Germany, the UK, France, or if it was, a lower GDP European country, because that will definitely impact heavily on the comparison there. So it's going to be fascinating just to see what she has to say. Let's do it.
I feel like I need to preface all of this by just saying that this is not a political video at all. It's just my impressions, my views, my opinions, nothing too serious. Best drivers and worst, all way crossroads. I am not surprised that a lot of people don't have passports in the US. I literally got kicked out of a Starbucks. Would I ever live in the United States? All right. Let's get started. So I'm Ava and I'm a travel YouTuber, as many of you might know. I've traveled to, I don't know how many because I don't really count, but 70 plus countries. And I am as European as it gets in the sense that I was born in Poland, I grew up in England, but I lived in a whole bunch of different European countries.
That's cool because now she's got a wealth of like experience of Europe. It's not like she was just from one country, so she's got a really good base of comparison.
Italy, Germany, Belgium, Poland, England. Recently, I wrapped up a 6-month trip of the United States where I traveled all across the country. The United States is such an interesting place. Some people love it, some people hate it. So in this video, I want to give you a little bit of a dose of how a European might perceive the US. First of all, cultural shocks. So you see, back home in Europe, we are all brought up with, Americanized culture of some kind. But it's only when you get to the United States that you realize how different some things are. So for starters, everybody smiles at you in the US and people give.
I've heard of this and I think it's nice, to be honest. A smile definitely brightens up my day.
You random compliments on the street. Like I'll be walking down the street and someone would just shout out from the other side of the street, like, nice tattoo, man, or like, I love your hair, or like, I love your necklace. People are so nice. I love that about the US.
Me too.
Another cultural shock that I experienced are the cars. All the infrastructure is centered around cars. So, in Europe, it would be really easy to take a bus or a train somewhere. In the US, it's like, you got a pickup truck or you have nothing at all. You take your pickup truck, even though you're not hauling anything, most likely in your pickup truck, and you go to a drive-through restaurant, drive-through cafe, drive-through shop, drive-through ATM.
Wow.
I swear there's...
Yeah, drive-through ATMs just don't exist here in the UK. I've never seen them in Europe either. But because you guys drive everywhere, that must mean you guys use a lot more fuel, don't you? A lot more gasoline, a lot more petrol, which obviously isn't great for carbon emissions and stuff. But I think I read somewhere that petrol, gas, is cheaper in the US, a lot cheaper, half the price almost as what we pay. So I could see why you would want to drive everywhere. It's just more convenient.
There's probably not a single drive-through ATM in all of Europe. The point is, it is a very car-centric culture. So without a car, it's kind of hard to get around, which is a major inconvenience if you don't drive. Also, I feel like in some of the places that I've been to in the United States, the concept of a pedestrian doesn't really exist because there's no sidewalk.
Wow, there's literally no pavement. That's crazy. So literally, if you wanted to walk to the store here, you couldn't really do it. You'd be walking on somebody's property.
Pavements. I don't know what you call them in the States. Pavements or sidewalks. I'm not sure what they are.
Wow.
Anyway, it's they are the least important thing on the road, which is kind of sad because, I like walking. Another cultural shock that I encountered was whenever I went to restaurants. What is up with the waiter just literally taking your card and then taking it somewhere? I don't know where they took it. Are they taking it to steal my data? Are they where did they take my card? In Europe, every single time the waiter would come over with the little card reader machine and you would like put in your PIN, you know, right there at your table. In the United States, they take your card away from you. And then there's the tipping culture. In the United States, you know, you go to get a coffee, it costs like $4, $5, whatever. And then you're taking it away, but you're still expected to give a tip. And it's not just any tip, it's like 20%.
I'm not going to say any more about tipping. You guys have heard my opinion on tipping quite a few times. I'm not going to say any more, but I just think it's a bit too much.
25%. Those are like the little options that they give you on the little iPad. You know, and if you tap like 10% or 15%, that means you're cheap. And that just makes you feel really terrible, like an awful human being.
Wow.
So you end up tipping 25%. We don't have that in Europe. In some countries in Europe, you don't even tip because I guess waiters are paid an appropriate living wage, so they don't actually need to rely on tips, unlike in the US. In some countries in Europe, you do tip a little bit, like 10% maybe, if the service is really excellent, but in a lot of places, you just wouldn't. So that was a really interesting difference. Not only are the prices in the United States generally higher, but you also have to add that extra.
That's interesting because people always tell me in the comments, oh, our food is cheaper in the restaurants. That's why you pay tips. If you got rid of tips, the prices of the food would go up. But here we have someone actually in America saying that the food is actually more expensive in restaurants in the US. So it's like, I just think the system needs to be reworked personally.
For tipping. Also, sales tax. Like, again, you go to a supermarket, it says one price, but you end up paying something completely different. What's up with that? And then there's like a couple of really small things that at first you don't even notice until you get it really wrong, and then you learn very quickly. So date formats. In the States, they put the month ahead of the day. How does that make any sense? Surely you should go from like smallest to biggest, right? Day, month, year.
I agree.
In the US, it's month, day, year. I'm sorry. It's just simply wrong.
It used to confuse me a lot because I used to read a lot of American forums or forums like that were posted in the States. And whenever I'd look for the most recent comment, it would be like 4:13 or 4:11. It would basically be super confusing. And I'd be like, what's going on here? Why does it look so strange?
And Fahrenheit. Don't even get me started on Fahrenheit, on pounds, on feet, and inches. Okay, I grew up in the UK, so I am familiar with some of those units, but Fahrenheit, just so confusing. So like 0 is the point just before freezing. So anything below 0 that is freezing should just be minus, right?
Yeah.
But in Fahrenheit, somehow it's like
still positive.
20 Fahrenheit is freezing?
I agree.
Honestly, I don't even know. Spent 6 months there, did not learn a thing.
What is the conversion from Celsius or centigrade to Fahrenheit? Like, what's the conversion? Is it like if something is, I don't know, 2 degrees centigrade, is it like -4 Fahrenheit? How do you convert it?
All right, let's move on to some of the differences between the United States and Europe. So I drove all across the United States, right? Like kind of twice, like all the way from Texas to Alaska and then all the way from Alaska to Southern California. And one thing that really struck me is the driving. So first of all, in the US, it's pretty common not to know how to drive, you know, stick shift, like manual. In Europe, that's basically how you learn. Everybody drives manual, and people do have automatic transmission cars, but like you can drive both, right?
I would say automatics are getting more popular now. They are getting a lot more popular on the road. But yeah, I learned manual. I still drive a manual. I think they're more fun to drive. However, if I had a long commute every day, driving for like 3 hours a day, constantly having to change gears, and work the clutch, that would probably get on my nerves a bit. So I can understand why people drive auto.
Right? Whereas in the States, it's mostly automatic transmission, which is kind of funny to me. So I felt like people gave me extra props for like being able to drive manual, whereas I'm just like, well,
it's normal.
It's nothing special. Everybody does it back home, you know? Then there's the road rules. Things that I just didn't know before coming to the United States. For example, in the US, even when the traffic lights are red, you can still make a right turn, right? In Europe, That is not the case at all. If the light is red, it is red for a reason. You have to stay there. Stop. Unless there's a little like green arrow like pointing to the right. Otherwise, you're standing there and waiting until it turns green. I can't tell you how many cars have like literally just sat there behind me waiting for me to make a right turn before I realized that I was actually allowed to do it. But they would just, sit there and like honk at me and I'll be like.
So when it's a red light, but you can make a right turn, is there nothing underneath the red light that indicates you can make the right? Or do you just need to know you can make a right turn? Because it would be helpful, I guess, if maybe underneath the red light, there was maybe like a green R, something like that, just for tourists to make it obvious that you can go right.
What's your problem? It's red. And then my favorite thing about driving in the United States, all-way crossroads. You know the crossroads with like the like red stop sign and then that says like 4-way or all-way? I still don't know what the difference is, but what it is, and this is mind-blowing, you drive up to this crossroad and then the first person that got to the crossroad has priority. So there's 4 directions, right? And then there's 4 people competing for priority. So you gotta sit there in your car while driving and like calculate, okay, that guy was first, that woman was second, then that guy, and
But man, I reckon this contributes to a lot of accidents, no? Because there's going to be some people who just don't care. They're not going to play fair. They're going to say, look, I don't care. I'm going. I'm not stopping. Vroom. Or am I wrong?
then I'm fourth. And then there's more cars coming. So it's super confusing. Like it's like a big mental workout. I am not kidding you. I used to find this so confusing. And like, I just didn't even know that was the rule. So it took me a little while to kind of figure that out with the help of a friend. I would just like literally stand there and like wait for people to go because I had no idea what the hell was going on there. In Europe, the person that's on the right always has priority. That's it.
Yeah.
So you don't really have to think about it very much. Another big difference between Europe and the United States is the sheer distance of everything. So
yeah, America's massive, huge.
So back home, you know, you'd like drive to the next city and you'd be like, yeah, you know, I'm like 3 hours away, you know, I'm like 200 kilometers away, or whatever. In the US, like people don't even talk about driving in terms of hours. They're like, yeah, it's a 2-day drive. A 2-day drive? Like in Europe, that is literally like the other end of the continent.
Yeah.
In the US, you're just like driving from one state to the next. It's pretty radical. And also Texas is huge. It's like never ending. Texas never ends. Never. My leg is asleep. Moving on to some of the expectations versus reality. Oh yes, hello little boy. So naturally, before coming to the US, before doing this massive road trips, I had some expectations built up about the United States. Now, mind you, this wasn't my first time in the US. I had already been to like San Francisco, LA, New York City, Miami, you know, but this is the first time that I actually drove.
Wow, that was really flat, wasn't it? Look how flat this area is. It's pretty cool, because here it's really hilly in the UK.
This is the first time that I actually drove across the country rather than just staying in cities.
Wow,
so
that is beautiful.
Yeah, I definitely came with some expectations. So let's see how they matched up to the actual reality. Okay, first of all, I really thought that I would see guns absolutely everywhere. Honestly, like to be completely honest with you, I expected that every Walmart would sell guns. That was
because that's what we hear.
Literally the idea that I had in my head, that every single Walmart in the United States had a gun section. That is not true.
Well, there's all kinds of sections here at this Walmart beyond the groceries. There's one thing that I do not see is guns.
It took me like 5 Walmarts before I actually got to the one that did have a gun section, which was really interesting. Like in Europe, you just do not see guns, ever. But in the US, they are relatively common. You do see in some states, obviously like states that are like open carry states, you see people with actual guns like, right, you know, like right here, which is interesting because that was an experience I never had before. But I definitely expected to see more guns than I did in reality.
That's interesting.
Now, this is not a video about gun problems and gun laws and things like that. I'm sure we all have our opinions. The fact is that I just expected to see many more gun shops everywhere. that I went, and I did. One thing.
Yeah, because that's what I hear. I hear that, you know, a lot of poorer neighborhoods are like full of like gun stores and liquor stores. So I'm guessing that's not quite the case, or maybe it's really those kind of areas are like quite few and the really poor areas.
That I was kind of worried about. I expected everybody to always talk politics. Because again, you know, politics is such a big, contentious, polarizing subject, not just in the US right now, but all around the world. So I was really worried that I would come to the US and I would have to have political conversations with people. And that fortunately didn't happen.
Nice.
I mean, the funny thing is that if you're from the States, the way that you have a conversation is telling of your political stance. The way that you joke about gun laws, or even just like looking at fences, you know, with like Trump 2024 or Biden something. There is so much politics all around the US, and like I think in the like psyche as well, in the American psyche.
Honestly, I think the birth of the 24-hour news cycle was like a definite downward point for society in general. Like, it's just the constant division. Personally, I think that the media, a lot of the media, just they use politics and stuff to just divide people and keep them from actually recognizing the big problems in society, which for me, you know, are these huge companies that don't pay their fair share. And, you know, the actual problems in society, like the real problems, like they just keep people, you know, pitted against each other as a distraction method, I think. But yeah, let's not get into all of that.
But luckily, I think as a foreigner, you get the privilege of not having to talk about politics. And I feel like people do see you as a bit of an alien in some way, that they just kind of spare you the political discourse, which is great. I'm honestly not there. I'm not there to talk about politics. I also expected all the food in the States to be absolute and utter trash. Garbage. There's so many of these words that now just trip me up. Garbage is American, trash is British.
No,
is it?
It's the
yes,
other way.
I think it is. Okay, so I expected all food in the States to be trash. It wasn't. It wasn't all bad. Maybe that's because I have been following mostly a vegan diet, so I have been avoiding a lot of the like super processed stuff. But the fact of the matter is that trash food is very, very, very cheap and very widely spread. But in the US, you can also get some of the best food in the world.
For sure.
It's just that it costs a little bit extra. Whole Foods,
sure.
I love you. I love you. The reality.
This is the thing, like if low quality food is cheap, people on lower incomes, you know, you can't really blame them for buying cheap food because it's budget friendly. I think, yeah, if the government really cares about like obesity and stuff like that, they need to subsidize quality food, or they need to just find ways to bring the price down.
What's up? What's up? Intruders? The reality is that the US has the best and the worst food in the world. It's just that the best food comes at a very high price point. I feel like back home, more people have more access to better quality food for like much lower prices. All right, let's move on to some of my favorites.
Just out of interest, how much in the US where you are, if you wanted to buy an organic whole chicken, uncooked, how much would that cost? So like organic, free range, all of that stuff. Here, you could probably get that for £6.50. Yeah, £6.50 for £7 for a whole, let's say 2 kg, maybe 3 kg chicken. How much would that cost? This is just a way for me to see how much more expensive quality food is in the States.
Some of my least favorites, some of my frustrations, some of my struggles, best drivers and worst drivers in the United States. My favorite places in the US, Montana, Wyoming, and then Central Nevada. Not Las Vegas, never been there. Like the deserts of Nevada. There's so much nature, so much space, so much beauty. Least favorite place in the United States, Yellowstone National Park.
Really?
Granted, I went there like at the height of the tourist season.
Full
But
of
man,
people.
that place is basically just a massive glorified parking lot. It is
Really?
like nature completely Disneyfied. And okay, it's great. It's probably more widely accessible to a lot more people, but I just feel like it just lost its charm.
Interesting.
So I might give it another shot in the future, but I wasn't wowed.
I think for tourists, maybe the lesser known national parks would probably be the best to go to in terms of actual seeing nature. Because Yellowstone, I think, is probably the most popular one. That and maybe the Grand Canyon. So there's always going to be a lot of people there, right?
Best drivers in the United States, Washington and Oregon. By and large, very polite. Worst drivers, Nevada and Montana. Oh my God. And I'm sorry to say, but if you own a Ram pickup truck, you are very much in that category. I can't tell you how many pickup trucks have passed me while you're honking and showing me obscene gestures for not going faster. It's like, man, my car is 17-year-old, 3.5 ton expedition rig. I cannot go faster than 60 miles per hour. Physically impossible. Have some respect. Yeah, Ram pickup drivers, not my favorite type. Here's a few things that I found frustrating and nice surprises in the US. So, I walk barefoot a lot of the time, and I literally got kicked out of a Starbucks for being barefoot. And there's plenty of restaurants and cafes and shops.
Maybe did they think she was homeless? Maybe that's why.
Shops that have that really obnoxious no shirt, no shoes, no service sign on the front door. Man, it's I'm not hurting anyone by being barefoot. So that was a bit annoying. And then a lot of places don't allow dogs, which is also a little bit sad because this little munchkin over here, come here, come say hello. This little munchkin over here would like to go to your cafe, and he's a very good boy. He's a very good boy, right? Just look at his face.
What breed of dog is this? It almost looks kind of like a wolf a little bit.
Okay, here are some of the nice surprises that I had when visiting the US. So by and large, I found people in the US to be really, really, really lovely. Very friendly, really polite, very welcoming and hospitable. Another really pleasant surprise, and this was probably my favorite thing about the US, was the sheer diversity of the country. I mean, there's just so much to see. And I could pretty much wild camp in...
Wow, look at this. This looks stunning. Looks like the mountains from the Evian bottles.
all of these amazing places in my 4x4 rig. I would imagine that if you're in a giant RVs, what the hell? We don't even have those in Europe. RVs. That's definitely another culture shock.
Yeah.
Anyway, I can imagine that if you're in a giant RV, that wouldn't be the case. But in my little truck, I had access to so many beautiful places, and that was just awesome. So, back home in Europe, people sometimes make fun of Americans, saying that, oh, they're Americans, they're not very cultured, they're not very well traveled. But you know what? I completely get it now. I get it why most Americans don't even have a passport. Because everything is so far away. In Europe, we have this amazing privilege that we can literally hop on a train or hop in the car, and within a few hours, we are in a completely different country with a separate language, a different culture.
Yeah, I think a lot of Europeans kind of forget that that Europe and the USA are almost the same size. So you could effectively say that, the US and its 50 states are kind of similar to Europe and its 30 countries, 35 countries. I don't know how many countries are in Europe. So yeah, you can kind of see why a lot of people would travel domestically in the States, especially because it's so much more expensive, probably to fly internationally, flying to Europe from the States versus us flying, to other European countries.
It is just so diverse, and everything is really close together back home. But in the US, everything is so far. Even getting to the next state is a trek and a half. So I am not surprised that a lot of people don't have passports in the US, or that they haven't traveled abroad, or that they don't know other languages, because in order to do these things, you have to be quite privileged financially, which back home in Europe is a very different kind of dynamic. So do I have any regrets? Yes, a couple. First of all, I really wish that I could have stayed longer, but my visa only ran for 6 months, so that's how much time I had, and I just really hope that one day I get to come back and see more of it. hopefully someday soon. Another regret that I have is not having really engaged with different communities across the United States. So next time I come, I'd love to get more perspectives on what it's actually like to live in the US today. You know, people from all kinds of different backgrounds and ethnicities and cultures and communities. So I really hope that I get to do that next time. So a few closing thoughts. I noticed that throughout my time in the United States, my accent started changing and it went from this like Britishy accent to something more like hybrid American.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I loved that about myself.
I think that's going to happen no matter what. Like if you move to a different country for quite a while, you are going to pick up like little mannerisms. Like I think, because I've been watching all these like American videos, there are certain words that I'll say now that have a bit of an American twang. It's such an interesting thing to observe.
So I'm just kind of like easing back into my normal way of speaking that is like not influenced by, you know, my context. So yeah. On to the big final question, the most important of them all. Would I live there? I don't know what the handshaking was all for, just to build extra tension. Anyway, would I live in the United States, given everything I have come to learn about this country, given all the places that I've seen? And the answer is very simple. Yes. 1000% I would live in the United States. To me, the United States is the most beautiful country in the world. It really is. I just love it so much. I completely fell in love. So if you're American and you're single, email marriage@avazubek.com to send me offers of marriage so that I can move there permanently and build a house in Montana or Wyoming or Nevada. Just kidding. That email address does not exist. So those are some of my impressions.
Fun video. I think she did a really good job in covering a lot of bases, like whether it's the diversity of the terrains, the politics, you know, the cultural beliefs, the food. She did a really, really good job. And I think I probably believe, you know, like I think I would have a similar outlook as her on most of the things she spoke about. Like I think if in terms of bang for buck, in terms of like just exploring and seeing different kinds of environments, the US probably can't be beaten. I think probably the only country that would come close is maybe somewhere, it's got to be somewhere equally huge, like maybe Canada or China, but I don't think you'd get as much, you know, different terrains as the US. Food-wise, I think, yeah, you know, you guys have you guys know I'm a big fan of a lot of American food. I think, yeah, there's just the choices on offer are hard to beat. I do think though that to live a really good life or a good life in the States, you probably need to earn a lot more than you would to live that same life here in the UK. I think from what I've read, you know, just the cost of living in like major cities in the US, you know, are probably higher like than London even though London's quite an expensive city to live in. Like I've heard in San Francisco, to rent like a 2-bed apartment, you're paying at least $3,000 a month, which is insane. Like here in London, you could probably get that for, yeah, it depends on the area, of course, but for as low as like $1,200 easily. But yeah, like the US has a lot of pluses for sure. It's gonna have haters, but you know, as they say, if you ain't got haters, you ain't popping. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.